All right. Song of Solomon, chapter 4. I heard of a story of a young pastor. He was new to a church. They had just hired him. He was new. His wife was the new young pastor's wife. And one of the subjects came up for the pastor to teach a message on sex. And kind of coming out of seminary, being a little bit nervous about teaching on the subject of sex and kind of uncomfortable with the word even. As he was writing his notes, he just put the letter S rather than writing out the whole word sex. And so every few sentences, there was the letter S. And his wife came into his study and looked over his shoulder and was like, honey, what does the S stand for? And just being uncomfortable with the word sex, he was like, it stands for sailing. Sailing, yes, sailing. And so, he thought, okay, I'll be able to teach this. I'll be able to do this. And the wife wasn't able to make it to church that Sunday. She got the flu. But the next Sunday, a bunch of the older ladies in the church approached her. And they're like, your husband did such a good job speaking on that subject last week. It's such a difficult subject. It was such a tough subject, but he did a great job. And in her mind, she was thinking, sailing? I mean, he's only done it twice, and he fell overboard both times. The subject of sex is a difficult one. Because, many of us come from different pasts, different experiences. Some good, some bad, some evil, some gross, some grotesque, some, great. And so how do we as a church deal with this subject? Because we've come from so many different backgrounds. I read this last week what the definition of dumb was. The definition of dumb, at least for newly married couples, the definition of dumb is you're on your honeymoon, a beautiful paradise setting, a stunning, beautiful, naked wife in front of you, and you're tempted by an apple. Sometimes it's men want to focus on our screens and not focus on our wives. We want to focus on our iPad and playing Angry Birds and not spend time devoted to our wives. And so how do we deal with the subject of sex, and what does it look like, especially when it comes to the Christian bedroom and so on? That's one of the things that's so great about teaching the Word of God book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, because we're just going with what's next in the text. And for us today in Song of Solomon, we're going to be in chapter 4, verses 1 through 16, and then cover chapter 5, verse 1 as well, in a message that I've titled Honeymoons and Honeycombs. Honeymoons and Honeycombs. And we'll see what the honeycombs are later, all right? And we'll be looking at 4 points and then drawing some application at the end. We'll be looking at verse 1 through 7, that the Christian bedroom is mental but also visual. Number 2, verse 8 through 11, that the Christian bedroom is passionate. Verse 12 through 16, that the Christian bedroom is available. And then chapter 5, verse 1, that ultimately the Christian bedroom is holy. That it's mental and visual, that it's passionate, available, and also holy. Now, if this is your first time or you haven't been in a while, I want us to all be on the same page and kind of set the scene, because I want us moving in the right direction. If you're new, welcome. It's going to be awkward today. I'm just letting you know that. For us as a church, we believe that all Scripture is God-breathed, it's God-given, it's profitable for reproof, doctrine, correction, and instruction in righteousness, meaning that all of God's Word is there for a reason and for a purpose, even as we go through the Song of Solomon. And the Song of Solomon has what we would call and or consider kind of risque conversation pieces, because a lot of what Song of Solomon has to deal with is love, intimacy, marriage, sex, singleness, dating, so on and so forth. And the reason why we are going through this is because, one, we're a Bible-believing church. We believe the Bible. When it says this, we believe this, and so on. But at the same time, I also wanted us to go through it because when it comes to the subject of sexual intimacy and romantic pleasure, the world has been screaming at the top of its lungs for years, and the church has been silent. And culture has pushed a warped view of romance and intimacy, especially on our young people, and what marriages are supposed to look like. And so we want to be able to respond in the right way. Why? Because we serve the God who created sex. We serve the God who made it, who designed it for a reason and a purpose. And so as Christians, how do we respond to these things? How do we look at these things? And so let me just kind of set the scene with Song of Solomon. It's a musical. This is the Song of Songs. This was his number one hit on the Jerusalem Billboard Chart 100. This was the one that stayed there the longest. As a matter of fact, 1 Kings tells us that Solomon wrote 1,005 songs, but this is the one that was the number one hit. And it's a story between a man and his wife, how they got together, how they got married, their wedding day. We'll see next week their first fight. And you know, how do you fight fair within marriages and so on and so forth. And it speaks a lot of physical intimacy between this man and this woman. And for us, this is kind of the proverbial talk as a church. It's talking about sex, and there's things in here that might be words you're not used to hearing, especially in church. There's bellies and navels and breasts, oh my. And so as we look at this, it's going to be like, can you say that in church? Well, we're saying it today, okay? Especially today. So what we've seen is the book starts out with them seeing each other and there's attraction. Then they make their way into the friend zone and they get to know one another. Then they start dating and getting to know one another better. Then they move to engagement a few weeks ago, and it goes from getting to know one another to really understanding one another, getting to figure out who the person is, to really sorting out who the person is. Last week we saw the wedding and their marriage ceremony and these 60 groomsmen who came to take the Shulamite woman back to Jerusalem and so on. And now today we get to the honeymoon. So you guys ready for this? 2 of you are ready. The rest of you are not. So you're just going to have to go with it, all right? Chapter 4, verse 1 through 7. The Christian bedroom is mental and visual. Notice what it starts off. This is Solomon speaking. He says, "Behold, you are fair, my love. Behold, you are fair. You have dove's eyes behind your veil, and your hair is like a flock of goats coming down from Mount Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of shorn sheep, which have come up from the washing, and every one which bears twins, and none is barren among them. Your lips are like a strand of scarlet, and your mouth is lovely. Your temples behind your veil are like a piece of pomegranate. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built for an armory, on which hang 1,000 bucklers, all shields of mighty men. Your 2 breasts are like fawns, twins of a gazelle, which feed amongst the lilies. Until day breaks and the shadows flee away, I will go my way to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of frankincense. You are all fair, my love, and there is no spot in you." This is their wedding night. There's no way to get around it. The couple is alone, and the only unforeseen guest is God. While God is never mentioned in the Song of Solomon, we see he does play a part in chapter 5, verse 1, where he'll look upon this naked couple and say, "Drink up the love. I bless you. This is a gift for you." And here, the couple is going to consummate their marriage and sexual union. And what I love about this is like I said last week, you could tell that a dude wrote this. And the reason being is because last week he spends like 5 verses on the wedding, and this week he spends 17 on the honeymoon. He's like, I showed up, and I ate a cake, and I had a tuxedo on, and now this is what happened, you know? And he explains everything that's going on. But notice, remember, this is Hebrew poetry. This isn't things that we take literal today. It's Hebrew poetry, and it's fairly graphic. It's not crude, it's not inappropriate, but it is graphic. And the hard part about interpreting this right is well, the church has done a bad job of interpreting it right for a long time. And the reason being is because that if you were here our first week, I showed you a stack of books I've been reading to go through this book, and one of the issues with it is because of the erotic portions of the Song of Solomon, and because of it being fairly graphic, people cringe, people clam up, and they don't want to hear those words in church. And so what's happened is the church and pastors have tried to make this an allegory. They've tried to look at this and say, well, when he says breast, what he means by that is the left breast represents the Old Testament, and the right breast represents the New Testament, and in between is the cross, and it's Jesus, bringing these two together. No, because that's weird. When he comes in, and sometimes they'll say, well, it's the Shekinah glory or the temple, and you have to pass between the left and the right of the temple to make your way. And so what's happened is lips don't mean lips, and kissing doesn't mean kissing, and breast doesn't mean breast. And you've got people not wanting to talk about those things in church because, well, it's uncomfortable. But yet we have no problem watching TV and listening to Hollywood tell us what those things really should look like. And we serve the God who created this, and so we want to make sure we are discussing these things, even if it means it makes us a little bit uncomfortable in church. And so I don't think it's an allegory. I don't think it's the Old Testament and New Testament, because one, it's weird. But two, I also think just Solomon just likes her breasts. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. We can't read more into the text than what is really there. So this is a celebration of love. This is highly sexual. It is. And as the couple has gotten closer, they've gotten closer emotionally, they've gotten closer spiritually, they've even gotten closer in their sexual desire for one another. But as we've seen a couple of times, she has said, do not awaken or stir love until it's time. No. We're not going to give into this. We're going to be restrained. We do have desires. Yes, God did create you with a sex drive, and that is absolutely okay. You just can't let sex drive. You can't give it the keys to your life. You can't let it drive you into a ditch, because it will. But he has given you those things. We just got to make sure we're good stewards of them. And so what we see here is as they've moved closer, they said, don't awaken love until it's time. Well, guess what? It's time. Today's the day. They got married last week. It was a beautiful wedding ceremony. Solomon went all out on this chariot that he decked in gold and silver and purple and so on. And now they make their way to what we would consider the proverbial hotel room or their home. When a couple gets married, they're all hanging out at the wedding. You got the dance, right? The father-daughter dance, the mother-son dance, and you eat a bunch of lasagna and salad and breadsticks, and everybody's kind of hanging out. And then the couple gets into a car, usually that's been like decked out by the groomsmen and weird stuff written on the windows, and they make their way to the hotel room. Or they make their way to the airport where they will ultimately end up in a hotel room. And everybody knows what's going to happen next, right? It's not a secret. Everybody knows that, right? Everybody knows that they're going on their honeymoon and that they're going to consummate their marriage and that they're going to have sex. This is the reason why the groomsmen are, kind of, hey, man, all day long, and the bridesmaids are like giggling the whole day. And that's the reason why you don't make eye contact with your father-in-law now. You're like, I know we're family now, but I just can't look at you because you know what's happening later, and it's just, love you, man, and you know what I mean? That's what's going to take place. And so I'm sure there's a bit of nerves going on in the room right now. It's just Solomon and the Shulamite woman. I'm sure there are some nerves. I'm sure there are some fears. If you're married, every single one of us have gone through that on our wedding night, the fears and the nerves. And we already know she has a history of insecurities. Remember, chapter 1 opened up and she says, don't look upon me because I am dark, because the sun has tanned me. So she has some insecurities on her already. And so there's these fears, insecurities, nerves, butterflies in the stomach. What's going to happen? And notice how Solomon approaches this. This whole time, holding back, red light, don't touch, don't do anything, don't fall into temptation, don't mess up, and now it's a green light. It's a go to enjoy all that marriage has to offer. And this picture provides for us, or this passage provides for us, a portrait of what the Christian bedroom should look like. And notice how Solomon starts out. He starts off slow. Not quick, not rough, not rushed, not any of those things. He starts off slow, and he starts off by dealing with the most important sexual organ for the woman, her brain. Not her body, but her brain. And notice what he starts off by saying, "Behold, you are fair, my love." He starts off by giving her words of praise. Words of praise and how beautiful she is. Notice he says, "You have dove's eyes." Now this isn't the idea that she's got these eyes that are like, it's not that. It's kind of like how your eyes are the window to your soul. And that's what he's saying. He says, "I see everything about you. I see much deeper than just your physical appearance. I see deep into who you are. I see your soul, and I understand the depth of who you are." He starts off by her veil, and notice he starts off from the top and works his way down. He starts off with incredible tenderness. He doesn't just like get into the bedroom and like Georgia the jungle, and like, "Come here," and rips her clothes off. No. Their clothes are still on. And he starts off by conveying just these words of praise. Now, the words that he says don't make sense to us necessarily, right? When he says, "Your hair is like a flock of goats," men, let me tell you, you're going to want to update your language here, okay? You're going to want to move into 2016, because for Solomon, he says your hair is like a flock of goats, and it ends well for him. Today, if you do that, it's not going to end well for you, all right? And so the ideas that he conveys are very much so Hebrew poetry. You guys might remember that book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. It was a number one seller for many, many years. And I believe the reason why it was a number one seller was because, well, men and women have a desire to communicate with one another. We just don't understand how to communicate with one another. We don't do a good job of doing that. And so when it comes to sex, it's been said that men are like microwaves and women are like crockpots. Men are, 2.5 minutes, you're good, everything's warmed up, you're ready to go, right? Women are like crockpots. It takes some time to brew and stir and grow, and the warmth kind of builds up. Women are more verbal and mental than men. And I don't mean like mental, like mental. Don't start throwing stuff at me, okay? I don't mean like crazy mental. I mean like women are more verbal and deal more with their brain, and their brains are moving 1,000,000 miles a minute than the guys. It's just true. Like ladies, men have a file in their brain called the nothing file. This is the reason why when you ask your husband, like, what are you thinking? Nothing. And for you, that's impossible. Why? Because your brain is running 1,000,000 miles a minute, and you're thinking about, man, I got to get soccer and dinner and the kids, and so-and-so's having a birthday, I got to get them a card, and oh, I totally forgot to get my dad a Father's Day card. I just thought about that right now. And, but you know what I mean? Like, but the guys, it's like, what are you thinking? Nothing. And we like to go to that file as often as we can. I'm just giving you a heads up. We love the nothing file. But for ladies, remember, they're more verbal. This is why you have whole settings for women developed and places developed for just talking. Bathrooms. Everyone goes, they go in groups. Tea houses, right? It's not about going and having tea. It's about sitting down with a group of friends and drinking tea and eating food and conversing and talking. Their minds are racing a million miles a minute. For guys, it just doesn't work that way. This is the reason why a guy can sit down with his best friend and watch a football game for 3 hours and not say a single word to each other. And then when the game's over, you punch each other in the arm, which is like your guy code for like good hanging with you, bro. Because we're not verbal. We just aren't. And so men, you need to understand this, that for you might not be verbal, but your wife is. And speaking and filling this little thing we have here, a mouth, with nouns and pronouns and words can go a long way, at least when it comes to sexual intimacy. Notice he starts off by verbally admiring her. You're beautiful. I see into your soul. He's not just talking about her eyes, but her appearance, but who she is. Your hair's like a flock of goats coming down Mount Gilead. Maybe he's drawing on a past experience. They went on a picnic and there were goats and, something beautiful for them and that he's using. But he's looking and talking about how beautiful she is, her character. And it might mean you might need to think of some things as husbands to really heap praises upon your wife. To love her, to think through some of those things a bit. Why is she beautiful to you? Why is she so on and so forth? Google some words. I don't know, just, anything to help. And you're like, well, no. He shouldn't Google words. That should come out of his heart. Listen. If he's trying, that's your problem, not his. All right. You've got to let him do that. Notice he talks tenderly to her and compliments her beauty. Verse 2 is probably one of my favorite verses. Notice what he says. He says, your teeth are like a flock of shorn sheep which have come up for the washing, every one of which bears twins, and none is barren among them. I love this. He's like, baby, you got all your teeth. This is a different time. He's like, you do not look like a part-time boxing instructor, you've got all of your teeth. And the reason being is because hygiene is much different now than it was then. And so for her to have all of her teeth, it's awesome. He's like, you got all of them. That's great. Notice verse 3 says your lips are like a strand of scarlet. He's saying her mouth is lovely, her lipstick, whatever the case might be. He says your temples behind your veil, quite literally her cheeks are like a piece of pomegranate. Maybe as he's complimenting her, she's beginning to blush. Maybe she's beginning to get a little bit rosy. And so he's complimenting her. He's starting off with her veil and he's tenderly working his way down her body. He says your neck is like a Tower of David. The Tower of David was a military structure that stood in the city for strength and safety. And what he's literally commenting on is that she's got strength and dignity. That she is a godly woman who can hold her head high. Not down low in shame, but high. He finds her very attractive. And the thing I want you to notice is they're not even undressed yet. They still have their clothes on. He hasn't even touched her yet. And yet, he finds her still very attractive. He's not in a hurry. He's building her up. He calls her darling twice. He's saying that she's the perfect woman. And so what do you think that's done to her? Remember, she's probably had some nerves, butterflies, insecurities, and as he's praising her and lifting her up and saying, I see deep into who you are, she realizes and probably understands that there's safety here, that there's no reason to be afraid, and it's probably melting those fears away. The Christian bedroom has to start here. It's been said that for the woman, sex starts in the kitchen, meaning the process begins way before you end up in the bedroom. Now, sometimes we as guys take the interpretation of that, and that means we get to grope in the kitchen. No. It's not groping in the kitchen, like, oh, I got to start in the kitchen, and I'm groping. No. It means that the verbal communication starts way before you end up in the bedroom. That the verbal communication of, hi, honey, how are you? How was your day? Oh, man, I thought about you all day today. Sending quick texts, hey, thinking about you. And those types of things begin way before you end up in the bedroom. And so a godly husband will understand and remember that love is a beautiful 4-letter word that is sometimes spelled T-I-M-E and sometimes it's spelled T-A-L-K. That for some women, talk is important. That it's not just, notice what he does, he doesn't just attack her, but he builds her up. And so if the woman is a creature of the ear, you could say then the man is a creature of the eye. So it starts mental, but it's also very visual. Notice what he says in verse 5. Your 2 breasts are like 2 fawns, twins of a gazelle which feed amongst the lilies. So now the dress is off, or at least it's halfway off. And notice he's visually stimulated. He says your breasts are like 2 fawns. What are fawns? Baby deer, right? Anyone? Fawns are baby deer. Am I correct or am I wrong on this? All right? Okay, I'm going somewhere with this. You need to understand. So let's say you're hanging out, camping in Estes Park, and you see 2 baby fawns in the field. How do you approach those baby fawns? Or do you approach quietly, hey, Bambi? I say that because, listen, you don't approach 2 baby fawns, running up to them, grabbing them, breaking their necks and legs, and no. You approach tenderly, gingerly. I mean, where do they, when you go to a zoo, where are the baby fawns usually? In the petting zoo? In the petting zoo, it's like, you're not going to like jump right in and like tackle. No. It's very calm. It's very graceful. It's very tender. You probably weren't expecting to hear that in church today, right? This is why, and I'll say this is why men get so stupid when we look at pornography. This is why we get foolish when we look and download pornography and watch movies or whatever it might be, because it distorts your reality of what sex is all about. It isn't portrayed in porn what love truly is. They're performers having sex, not making love. And pornography is a facade, a ruse, and an illusion of intimacy that your wife might not ever want to go into those areas, but because you filled your mind and your heart with those things, you put the pressure on her to do things that are uncomfortable and not good or godly. Pornography destroys the soul of a Christian man. And it ruins the sexual intimacy that a man and a woman can really truly have in the bedroom. Sex, the way that God made it, is romantic. It is intense, yes, but it's tender. It's beautiful. We all have sex drives. Men sometimes are about the destination, getting there. Women are about the road and how do we get there. And Solomon understood this. He understood that his wife's most important sexual organ was not her breasts, but rather her brain. And he starts by building her up and loving her. And notice in verse 6, he says, until the day breaks and the shadows flee away, I will go to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of frankincense. Now, do you understand what he's saying here? He's saying, baby, we're going to be here all night long, until day breaks and the shadows flee. Now, I don't know if our boy Solomon has that type of stamina, but I love his heart, all right? I love his intention here. He's like, honey, you need to bring the Gatorade. I will bring the energy bars, and we're going to be here a while, okay? But what I love is then he's, verse 7, you are fair, my love, and there is no spot in you. You're perfect. And here, the first time he sees her naked, and he says that she is perfect. Why? Because for Solomon's standard of beauty, the standard of beauty wasn't based off of all the women that he had seen on a TV screen. His standard of beauty was his wife. That's what he liked. So if your wife has blonde hair, guess what? You love blonde hair. She dyes it, now you're a redhead, you like red hair. Like why? Because your standard of beauty is not the things you see, not what Hollywood tells us, not what Hollywood displays to us, but rather what your spouse looks like and acts like. That's your standard of beauty. So you used to, ladies used to love a six-pack, but now he's got a kegger. You love keggers. Just your standard of beauty goes with your spouse. Notice our next one. Verse 8 through 11, the Christian bedroom is passionate. It says, come with me from Lebanon, my spouse, with me from Lebanon. Look from the top of Amana, from the top of Senir and Hermon, from the lion's den, from the mountains of the leopards. You have ravished my heart, my sister, my spouse. You have ravished my heart with one look of your eyes, with one link of your necklace. How fair is your love, my sister, my spouse? How much better how much better than wine is your love? With the scent of perfume and all spices, your lips, O my spouse, drip as the honeycomb. Honey and milk are under your tongue, and the fragrance of your garment is like the fragrance of Lebanon. He's literally inviting her into the bed now. She is naked. He is inviting her into the bed. Come with me to Lebanon. This is the place where we can explore and be passionate. And he starts by saying, hey, listen, leave the lion's den. Leave the place of the leopards. Why? Well, some people would say it's because the lion's den, the place of the leopards, was her home, where they were mean, cruel to her. They made her work in the field. I think the idea of the leopards and the lion's den is the place of safety, or the place where they protected themselves. Meaning they had set up some lions and leopards to protect themselves from falling into sexual temptation before they got married. They knew, listen, it's not going to end well if we start a movie at 11 o'clock at night at your house on the couch. It's not going to end well, so we're not going to do that. We're not going to touch. We're not going to pet. We're not going to do any of those things. We have set these guards, these lions, these leopards to protect us so that we don't awaken love before it's time. But now that we are married, man, we get to be here. We get to enjoy one another. So let's leave the guards. Let's be joined together. The rules were there for precautions, but now they don't need to guard themselves with those rules because he doesn't have to go home at the end of the night. He doesn't have to drop her off on the front door, give her a kiss goodbye, and leave. He gets to stay the whole night now. And so they get to enjoy these things, and it's a hard shift. It's a hard shift for young couples to, you want to do things the right way. You want to remain pure. You set the guards up, no touchy, a little Emperor's New Groove, no touchy. And then all of a sudden within the course of a half an hour wedding ceremony, it's red light, red light, red light. Now it's green light. And so you get to enjoy one another. And he's saying, walk away from those things. Let's enjoy one another. He calls her sister. That's not like weird, okay? They're not from a certain region of the country. He just calls her sister. You are my love. It's a term of endearment. Notice he says you have the scent of perfumes. She smelled good. Listen, guys, you want her to smell good. That's why there are whole stores dedicated just for women smelling good. Because you don't want a woman who smells like you, You don't. And so notice he says your lips drip like honeycomb. And honey and milk are under your tongue. They're kissing now. Her lips taste like honeycomb. She's been using that Burt's Bees chapstick, you know. Anybody use Burt's Bees chapstick? That's some good stuff, man. She's been using that. And notice what he says. He says, honey and milk are under your tongue. So what kind of kissing is this? Right? French kissing? No. It's not French kissing. You know how I know? Because France didn't even come and become a nation until the 9th century AD. This predates France by 1900 years. This is Hebrew kissing. Okay? Under your tongue. It's awesome. And notice what we see here is in this passion. It's sensual. They're talking about smells and tastes and sounds, and it's very passionate. And the union of a husband and wife coming together makes sex more than sex. It's passionate. It's exciting. Notice our next point. It's available. Verse 12 through 15. A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse. A spring shut up, a fountain sealed. Your plans are an orchard of pomegranates with pleasant fruits, fragrant henna and spikenard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with all the trees of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, with all the chief spices. A fountain of garden, a well of living water, a stream from Lebanon. Notice now she is speaking, the Shulamite woman. Verse 16, awake, O north wind, and come, O south, blow upon my garden, that its spices may flow out. Let my beloved come to his garden and eat its pleasant fruits. All right. Listen, this idea here is the idea of exclusive sex between a husband and wife. It seems that she is a virgin because he says that you are a garden enclosed, a spring shut up. It seems that she is a virgin. He is praising her for keeping herself pure. She has saved herself for marriage. She has saved a precious treasure that only belongs to him. And Solomon is comparing it to the best garden you can ever find. Remember, Solomon was a botanist. He grew whole forests. If you go to Jerusalem or Israel with us, we'll take you to some of his places where, he was a smart cookie when it came to gardens. And what he was saying was that you and your virginity, your purity being given to me is like finding the most incredible garden that the world has ever seen. It's like finding the lost city of Atlantis. It doesn't, you're never going to find it, but I have found it. Why? Because he brings fruits and spices and things that can't grow together. Cinnamon and pomegranates cannot grow in the same garden. They need different amounts of light. They need different amounts of water. And what he's saying is your garden, your virginity, your purity is very special to me. Like Star Trek, Solomon is boldly going where no man has gone before. You know? He's going to a place where no one has gone before, and there was something that was happening here that shows between a husband and wife, there's a sacred and special and unique union that is just available for them. This is why the writer of Hebrews, I believe, says that the marriage bed is undefiled. That when a man and a woman are brought together in physical intimacy, in marriage, in sex and consummation, that there is a special, beautiful, amazing union that takes place between them. And when you allow pornography to filter into your marriage bed, not just visually speaking, but I'll even say verbally speaking, 50 Shades of Grey, Danielle Steele, those types of things you allow to come into your marriage bed, it messes up the sacred union that God had designed for it to be so special. They were available to one another. I have never met someone that has regretted saving themselves for marriage. Never. I've met plenty of people that have regretted not saving themselves. And this is why waiting is so important. She has held back from others what was only available to her husband. The well that was once off limits is now accessible to him. For purity and pleasure, they go hand in hand, and being married opens each other up for availability to one another. And notice her reaction now. What has he done? He's built her up, he's wooed her, he's touched her, he's kissed her, he's spoken great words to her, and then what does she say? Blow upon my garden. She's saying, baby, crockpot is warm, all right? I hope you brought some Red Bull. This is a beautiful display of a man and a woman who have saved themselves, and now physical intimacy and union can take place. They've waited so long. They've made sure not to awaken love before it's time, and now that it's time, they get to enjoy and partake in it. She's available to him. And this is what servant lovers look like. That the goal isn't for me to get what I want and get my pleasure and enjoy myself and be done like you see on TV, where it's just this like wham, bam, you get your clothes and you leave. But rather the idea is the servant lover, where I want to serve, I want to please, I want to bless, I want to make sure that they are satisfied. And it goes the other way as well. They're mutually expressing love, and it's a reminder that, well, listen, ladies, men desire for their wives to desire them. It's true. He might not ever say it. He might not come out and say, like, I just wish you wanted me. But we do. We desire to be desired. And so notice what she does by saying, honey, come, love, north wind, south wind, enjoy me. I can tell you that, well, men desire to be desired. Lastly, notice this, the Christian bedroom is holy. Chapter 5, verse 1 says, I have come to my garden, my sister, my spouse. I have gathered my myrrh with my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I have drunk my wine with my milk. Notice mine, 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 mine. It's a beautiful display of what took place in Genesis. When Adam sees Eve in the garden, he says, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. That's mine. Mine. Don't touch. No one else can touch. That's mine. And the idea here is they've enjoyed one another. The act or the physical act of making love is over with. And he says, I've gathered, I've already eaten. Like they're hanging out on the bed. And then an audible takes place. Notice it says, eat, O friends, drink, yes, drink deeply, O beloved ones. Somewhere in their bedroom, an audible comes in and says, eat, drink, O beloved ones. Now, some interpretations would come in and say that that's Solomon's friends and groomsmen hanging outside the tent, waiting for the consummation to have taken place so that they can start the festivities. I don't believe that to be the case. Why? Because what Solomon had said earlier when he said, honey, we're going to be here all night and all day. I don't think his friends and family are going to wait beside the tent for 24 hours. So who is this? Notice it says, to his friends, capital H. I believe it's God interjecting into this couple's honeymoon. He says, eat, drink. I believe that it's God, even though he's not mentioned physically in the Song of Solomon. I believe it's him speaking over these two naked lovers on their wedding day and saying how holy and amazing the Christian bedroom is. That God, the maker of heaven and earth, the maker of you and I, who gave us life and gave us souls, looks at a man and a woman and he says, that is a good thing. When they're naked and unashamed together. Remember, it's a song he sings over them. Sadly, here's the hard part. Like everything else that God has created, sex has been abused. And when people abuse his gift, it grieves him. It hurts his heart. And listen, when there is a barrier in a marriage relationship and intimacy is blocked because of wounds, because of walls that have been built over the course of years, because of insecurities, because of maybe past experiences, rape, molestation, all of these things there can be some issues, and it breaks God's heart. I'll tell you that. It breaks his heart because he looks over sex and views it as a blessing and what is good. And just because something bad or evil has happened to you through the realm of sex, I believe God wants to restore and fix those things. And so for the health of your marriage, get counseling. Talk through those things. It might mean, husband, you might have to hold off for a while in order for healing to come. You might have to build up trust again. It might mean abstaining. Maybe she just had a baby, maybe a hysterectomy. I mean, there might be different things all the way around. But for the sake of freedom and healing and restoration, God can work. My prayer is that for us as a church, we'll find freedom in the saving power of Jesus Christ, freedom from the carnage and pain caused by sex when it's taken and torn out of God's hands. Freedom to heal in a clean slate because the Christian bedroom is holy. And I believe that God wants you guys to have beautiful, amazing Christian bedrooms on a consistent basis. Because God looks over those things and says they're awesome. And if God says it's awesome, don't we want to partake in the awesomeness of God, who gives us good gifts? He doesn't give us a snake when we ask for bread or stones when we ask for bread. You know, he gives us good gifts. As we close, there are 3 things I'd like to take from this morning's message. I almost just had one thing. I almost was like, now go home and practice. But it was hot today, and I don't want anybody having a heart attack and blaming me. So we got 3 things to close. Number 1, 2 wrongs, 1 right. You've heard the phrase, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Well, we've got 2 wrongs, one right. 2 views of sex that are wrong and 1 view that is right. And here's what it is. Number 1 is that sex is a god or sex is an idol. Sex is an idol in people's life. This is the reason why you pay money for it, you download it, you give yourself over to it. It takes the place of Jesus, you become addicted to it, and sex is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Entertainment, television, marketing, porn, strip clubs, fashion, cosmetics, Botox, Viagra, these are all the temples that people worship at. And so sex has become a god. And this is the reason why, when we first started this series, I talked about the sexual revolution of the 1960s, because the sexual revolution of the 1960s made it so that you can't tell me what to do with my body, you can't tell me how to live, you can't tell me what I can do and can't do. I can do what I want, when I want, with whoever I want, however I want. And you can't mess with me on that. And what ends up happening is it looks like freedom, but it actually turns into slavery. Because you are now having to download it. You've got to sleep with your boyfriend for it. You've got to give into your body's cravings, even if it steals from your future. The second view is the complete opposite reaction of sex being an idol, is that sex is gross. It's gross, it's dirty, it's vile, it's nasty, it's horrible, it's disgusting, so save it for the one you love. And so what has happened is it's a bad overreaction to the first. So sex is bad, pleasure is bad, intimacy is bad, and the church has gotten a bad rap on this because, well, you know, we've ruined it, we've messed with it, and so sex becomes something that's only for procreation, making kids, and if your husband wants sex, well, I've got to take one for the team now, and okay, fine, and we begrudgingly give ourselves over to it, but we've got this view in our minds that it's horrible. In the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages even made manuals for days that you can and can't have sex. And so by the time it was all said and done, half of the calendar year was out because they wanted people to be chaste in their approach. So a guy wakes up and he's like, what day is it? Can I have sex today? It's Tuesday. Because it was bad. It was evil. And yes, some people have the opinion that sex is gross because they were raped, abused, and what happened was gross. Your experience with sex was gross, but it doesn't mean that sex in and of itself is gross. Jeremiah 2:13 says, "For my people have committed 2 evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living water, and hewn themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water." And so sex is preached as something that we don't do. You don't. And yes, you don't watch porn. Yes, you don't have premarital sex. Yes, you don't make out before marriage. But the right way to approach it is the third way, is that sex is a gift and it's awesome. As a matter of fact, the scriptures don't start out with sex in the negative, but rather in the positive. When it says Adam and Eve were brought together and the two were naked and unashamed and it was good, it's the idea or the thought line of the word tov. It's good, it's beautiful, it's awesome, it's powerful. And so, it's for being brought together in intimacy and pleasure and procreation and as well recreation. You burn some calories, It's also for comfort when there's times of trials and frustrations. We saw that with David and Bathsheba when they lost the baby. And so you don't do anything before marriage. No inner course, no outer course, no upper course, no downer course, no golf course, no coursing. And then you get married and you enjoy the gift. Number 2, we need to remember microwaves versus crockpots. Solomon admired his wife. He built her up. He communicated to her. He put down the remote. He made eye contact. Called her a goat. You might not want to do that, but the idea is that it might take some time to warm her up. And we need to see in our culture that sex is something that's for self-gratification and pleasure, but being married, it's a beautiful thought line of being a servant lover, loving them well. Solomon wasn't like quick to jump into this. He wasn't like, we got to get this done and come in like Tarzan. No. He wasn't like listening to William Tell's overture, the dun 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 dun. He wasn't like, no. He had like some smooth jazz on his iPod, some Marvin Gaye. Just taking it slow. And what does that look like within your marriage? I don't know, but maybe you draw a bath, maybe you read a book, maybe you hold hands. God made men and women differently for a reason and for a purpose. One commentator said that if men and women had the sex drive of a man, they would get nothing done. And if men and women had the sex drive of women, they would get a lot done, but there would be no people on earth. So the idea is it starts early in the day, men, with a call, a card, a touch, a conversation. And you have to do the work necessary to be a good servant lover. And lastly, we'll close with this: practice. Practice. Do you think Solomon and his wife had it all together their first night? No. It took time. It took practice. And it took communication, I believe. One of the thought lines here is when we see that it's not about techniques or styles, but rather finding ourselves in the rhythm of how God designed sex to be, we have to practice and communicate it. And here's the problem, is that some of us have developed some really bad habits when it comes to sex within our marriages. We haven't talked through things. We haven't talked through issues. We haven't talked through our pasts or the things that have happened. And so we clam up whenever he touches us, or we use sex as a manipulation tool to get what we want. I'll use sex as long as I can get the credit card to go do that, or whatever it might be. We don't communicate our desires, saying, honey, I like this, I don't like this, let's not do that, let's try this, let's never do that again. Pulled a back muscle or something. Like, you've got to communicate those things. Too much? You got to communicate those things. You got to practice and communicate, because if not, then you use sex as a tool to destroy the reality is the Christian bedroom is supposed to be joyful. What does God say? He says, drink, my friends. It is a gift. I want you to use it. I want you to have joy and passion and availability and know that this is holy and our marriage bed is undefiled. But you've got to communicate. You've got to work through those things. So for you married couples, practice. Homework. Pastor Fern's homework this week. And for you single people, don't awaken love until it's time. God will bring that person. God knows the desires of your heart. He does. And he's a good, good father who wants to give you those things. Let's pray. Dear God, I thank you that we can talk about this subject in church, that you put it in the Bible for a reason. I thank you, dear God, that we have, as a church, been able to just laugh through some things and talk through some of them. I pray that maybe if there are areas of conviction that you are poking at us, dear God, I pray that we would respond well to those convictions. Fill us, use us, empower us this week as we go out. Help us to communicate well with our spouses. Help us to work, dear God, and do the work necessary with our spouses to raise them up verbally. I thank you for our church. I thank you, dear God, that you love us so much. And so we put them into your hands as they head out this week. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's stand. Let's sing this.